So welcome everybody to my first ever live stream. And the nature of the topic today that I want to talk about is fear. And it's around why we have fear. How does the brain cope with fear? Fear is such an intense emotional response for us, and it's designed to basically help us stay alive, really. The idea behind getting fear is so that we take appropriate action to make sure that we survive. The thing is, though, I don't know about you out there, perhaps you have family or friends or maybe clients or people like that who have anxiety. Now, anxiety is a form of fear. If we think of fear as a scale, anxiety is a form of fear. And I, in my own personal clinic, have people from the age of, 8 years old, all the way through to even a 68-year-old experiencing anxiety. It's almost like, it's almost like it's a pandemic status at the moment in the world. And people have anxiety to things like going for job interviews. They have things like anxiety about maybe even going on a date, or maybe even doing like a live stream for the first time, just having a bit of anxiety around that. Now, for me, anxiety is intuition. It is a feeling that we have that lets us know something about what we're experiencing perhaps isn't safe. Perhaps it's not certain. We're not sure what's going on. And the feeling that we get is actually our intuition. And we label it as anxiety. And sometimes, depending on our life, that anxiety can build and it can build and it can build. And we can end up having disproportional responses to what are just day-to-day events, really. And we can even have panic attacks. So my name is Frances Lamb. I am a Havening Techniques facilitator, and I am New Zealand's first Havening Techniques trainer. And I feel very privileged and blessed to be that. Now, with the clients that I see with anxiety and fear, I help them understand what's going on for their bodies. I help them understand the link between that emotional response and what's actually happening in their brain, because I personally believe that once we understand what's going on, we can then find solutions to deal with it. And so part of what I'm going to do here today is show you just a little bit about what's happening in the brain. Just going to touch on it a little bit. And then I'm going to, if you stay to the end, I'm going to show you and introduce you to a technique called havening. Now, havening means safe space. A haven is a safe space. And the technique is really simple. It's really easy to apply. And if you are working with clients, if you have family members or friends or colleagues, or perhaps even yourself, maybe you have a little bit of anxiety or stress or overwhelm, you can use this technique to basically dial down that emotional response. And so Havening itself was designed, well, it sort of came about, I think the first training was in 2012 in England. It's designed by Dr. Ron Rudin, a Harvard MD. He has the second largest practice in New York City. And in collaboration with his brother, Dr. Steve Rudin, they designed these techniques called Havening. And I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of what I teach on my 2-day training. Now, I'm running some trainings soon. I'm running some trainings in Wellington, in Auckland, in Christchurch, and even in Canberra in Australia. So I'm going to share a little bit about that with you later. So for now, though, I'm just going to switch screens, and I'm just going to go to my PowerPoint so that we can actually see the PowerPoint that I've got up for you. So just bear with me while I just get that up. And I need to go to this screen. Okay, and I need to share. Just bear with me. I'm going to share my entire screen. I just talk myself through this. Just bear with me. And here we go. So hopefully you can all see that. You can see everything that's going on there for us at the moment. So just talk myself through this. Just bear with me. So first of all, what we need to understand is that we have 3 brains. We have an instinctive brain known as a reptilian brain. Some people actually say there's 2 brains in there, but for the purpose of this presentation, there's the instinctive brain. That controls all our things like our heart rate, our breathing, our body temperatures, the movements that we have, like, being able to run and sending blood around our body. It does all the things that we don't have to think about. And we have a thinking brain, the new brain. Now, this is the part of the brain that does things like language, abstract reasoning, creativity. It's the thinking brain. And between those is what we refer to as the emotional brain. The emotional brain, or the mammalian brain, is actually not a brain per se. It's like it's a limbic system. It's made up of lots and lots and lots of different parts of the brain. Now, there's two bits in particular that I really want to share with you today, because I think when we understand what's happening, we can really know what's going on in our body, and then we can, as I say, make some choices to help us dial down those feelings. The bits we're interested in are the thalamus and a part of the brain called the amygdala, sometimes referred to as the alarm center of our brain. Now, I should say, if you've got any questions as I'm talking, please feel free to type them into the Facebook feed. I've got my phone here, so I can also look through that and I can answer any questions you've got. And also, perhaps at the end, if there's time, we'll be able to do some questions. I'm thinking this is going to be about 15 minutes, possibly 20. So that's the first thing to know. We have three brains. Now, how we see the world is different for all of us. We experience and sense and know the world through our senses. Now, it's generally agreed that we have 5 senses: auditory, our hearing; gustatory, our taste; olfactory, smell; visual, what we see; and touch. And I actually think there's a third one as well. The third one being instinct, our intuition. I think that's the third one. Oh, hi, Iona. Thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. And thanks for your help this morning. I appreciated that as well. So we all see the world differently. And our experience of how we see the world, even this live stream right now, how you hear it, how you see it, how you feel it, it's going to be really different for all of us. And that's based on your past life experiences, your memories, it's based on your value systems, your learning styles. There's so many different things that are taken into account. But generally speaking, we see the world through our senses. Now, there's 4 senses on this next slide: auditory, gustatory, visual, and touch. Now, I think science says that we have basically 40 billion pieces of information a second come into our brain, into our bodies through our senses. 40 billion. Now, the brain has to make sense of all of that stuff. Otherwise, we would just probably implode with all that information. And so the brain is very clever. In the limbic system, there is this part of the brain called the thalamus. Now, I like to refer to him as Tony. Tony, my man. Tony in the thalamus center is like a post office sorting box. Now, what Tony's job is, he has to take this 40 million pieces of information that we bring in through our sensory input, and he has to decide one of 2 things. Is what we're seeing, feeling, sensing, and knowing safe for us? And that what we're experiencing is not a threat? Or is it not safe? And is it a threat? And so Tony has a very important job. Tony, the thalamus, sorts all this information out. And he deletes some because it's probably not relevant. He distorts some to make it fit our map of the world. And sometimes he just generalizes information. But he'll go and store that information. Now, you'll notice there's only 4 up there. And that's because smell is different. Smell is our earliest detection warning system. And smell doesn't need to go to Tony. It is so innate in us that the olfactory goes to a different part of the limbic system. It actually goes to a part of the limbic system called the amygdala. Now, Amy, as I like to call her, Amy the amygdala is like an alarm center. It's like where alerts go off in us to tell us that things aren't safe. Now, the amygdala and the thalamus are very clever. What they do is they send information to and from all of those 3 brains. And that information is making a decision about how we're going to respond to the perceived threat that we have in front of us. So smell is it's such innate. It's such an innate warning system in us that it goes straight into the amygdala. Now, if the amygdala decides it's a false alarm, it will just send it to that thinking part of the brain, the cortex, that new part of the brain, and say, all good here, we're okay. So let's take this example that we've got here. We're going for a nice walk in the park, having a lovely day out. And as we walk past these two, what seems like adorable dogs, they actually start jumping up. Now, the one on the left, gosh, look at him with his teeth all showing and everything like that. Now, that is a threat. It's what we call a learned threat. Now, in our lives, we have some threats that we are conditioned to learn are threats, like a dog baring its teeth like that. And other times we have things that we are born to be fearful of, things like closed spaces, heights perhaps. And on the 2-day training in Havening Techniques, we go into this into a huge amount of detail, because it is the perception of threat in our life that creates all the alarms in our system. And depending on how many alarms we have in that amygdala center will depend how much anxiety and fear and panic and overwhelm and stress we can feel. Now, when we look at this picture of this dog, we see the threat. The threat is the dog on the left. And our body will have a fear response to that. It wants us to survive this threat. And it will be taking in information about that dog, its size, its colouring, maybe its smell. It'll also be taking in, look at the dog on the right, licking its lips. It's probably thinking, yum, yum, look at that. I'm going to have a bite of that one. I mean, we will be taking in all this information, even the colour of the, what's that thing called? A harness. That is the threat, that dog. But our brain is so smart that it will also take in things like the colour of those trousers, the style of the shoe, maybe the height of the person, the sound of the person, maybe their voice. Our brain will be processing and taking in all this information to decide if it's safe or not. And sometimes this is where phobias come from. The brain can take in certain information and, if you like, almost incorrectly wire it as the threat, as opposed to the dog. We might see the red collar or the red colour as the threat. But not only is the brain looking at the dog itself as the threat and the things that are closely associated, but it's also taking in all the environment that this is taking place in. So any information in this environment, anything that we're seeing, anything we're feeling, anything that we're hearing or tasting, also anything like our thoughts at the time. If we're thinking, goodness, I'm going to get beaten, I'm going to get bitten. You know, maybe we're thinking that dog looks, I'm going to get bitten, it's going to hurt me. Our thoughts are actually taken on board. The feelings that we have, this feeling of fear or terror or anxiety, is also taken into our systems. And our mind and our body are really closely connected. They are linked together. We are one unit. And we will be taking all this. We'll also be taking in stuff from that reptilian brain, our autonomic responses, like how fast is our heart breathing? Are our teeth chattering? Are we shivering? Are we sweating? Any of those autonomic or somatosensory experiences will all be taken into our system. And what the body does is, in an event like this with this dog, the first thing it does is it has salience. It gathers information. It gathers information from what it's seeing, feeling, hearing, sensing, and knowing. And it will make a decision in 100th of a second whether that threat is real or not. So it freezes before it makes a decision. And you may have heard of this response. Our response to keeping us alive is known as fight, flight, or freeze. But there's actually a few other things here as well. So once we've gathered the information and we've froze to really, process that information, we will make a decision in the best decision for our survival in that moment based on our experiences. We may flight, we may flee, we may run away if escape is possible. We may fight. We may also do something like defensive rage. Now, defensive rage is an unusual term, but what it actually means is that sometimes when we're faced with a threat, we can dig so deep into us that we have like really, really intense emotional releases. It's like, you know, the grandmother who picks up the car off the child. It's that type of intensity. It is that sort of where we suddenly become, 6'6" tall, and we can, fend off a bear attack or a shark attack if we're in those sort of environments. But you get the idea. So we can fight. We can do defensive rage, this intense fight response. We can do flee. We can run away if we can escape. We can also do panic. And panic is where the fear is so intense, so intense that we basically switch off all our thinking. And this is where the term amygdala hijack comes from. It's from Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence. And he talks about the amygdala being hijacked by our emotions because they're so intense. And because we have to survive, we switch off our thinking and we go into an autonomic response. Now, the other one that we can do as a fear response is thanatosis. Hope I've pronounced that right. I think it's pronounced thanatosis. And it's like an extreme freeze response. It's like possum playing dead. It is that freeze response where there is just nothing happen. We just, say we've been attacked, we might play dead so the attacker leaves us. So they're the responses that we can get. So Tony, the Thalamus man, he is sitting in his sorting center and he is looking to see if information is safe or not safe. Is what we're experiencing at this moment safe or not safe? If he believes it's a threat to us, it goes to the amygdala. Now, Amy, the amygdala, her job is to create alarms based on those experiences. Now, if Amy decides that actually we can escape whatever's going on and no harm has been done, we can just go, phew, thank goodness that happened. I'm okay, I'm safe, and I'm fine. And that's what our job's supposed to do. If we're faced with a threatening situation, the brain is designed to keep us safe. It is the primary directive of our unconscious mind. And there is some school of thought that says the thalamus is the unconscious mind. And so the thalamus's job is to keep us safe. He sends information to the amygdala, who sends information over all the three brains to create a fight, flight, freeze response to get us out of that situation. Now, once that situation's over, we can go, phew, goodness, whew, that was a bit scary, but we're done. So why is it then that sometimes two people can be a part of the same experience and one doesn't have any issues with it, and yet the other has loads? The other seems like they can never, ever forget that. They're always being triggered by something. Like not just the dog that looked like the dog in the picture, but all dogs. They suddenly develop a phobia of all dogs, or they maybe develop a phobia of walking in the park or something like that. And this is because the amygdala will decide that there are certain things in that experience that it needs to keep us on really high alert. So things like we make the event mean that we're going to lose our life, that we're going to lose something that we're really, really passionate about keeping, we're emotionally attached to. So our possessions, our friends, our family, our dogs, our homes. If we think that we can't escape that event, we can't influence it or control it in any way. And if, perhaps at that time we're not doing so good ourselves, we've had a lot of stresses and a lot of adverse things happen to us, the amygdala is smart enough to keep us on high alert for everything in the future. And if you've experienced multiple things, you will have multiple alarms, and they can all go off the same because they'll have different triggers. I like to think of it sometimes like in our brain, in the amygdala, we have these neurons, and on these neurons are these things called AMPA receptors. And I like to think of AMPA receptors as little meerkats. They're little meerkats. They come out and they're stuck on the surface and they're looking around constantly, warning you of any danger that is happening. Now, on the 2-day Havening Techniques training, we go into a lot more detail. We actually delve into the amygdala a lot more because we think of the amygdala as one unit, if you like. It's an almond shape. It's actually the amygdala. There's two of them, two almond shapes that are connected. But actually within it, there's 12 subnuclei. And we look at 5 of those nuclei and we explore a little bit more about how this sensory input behaves the way it behaves. So if you're here, I just want you at this point to understand that when we have an experience where there is a threatening content, and that threatening content means that we may lose our wellness, our well-being, or something that we're emotionally connected to, Tony in the Thalamus sorting center will send that information to Amy. And Amy will make us have a fight, flight, freeze response or defensive rage to get out of that situation. Sometimes we can just get out of it and go, phew, we're all good. And other times it seems like no matter what we do, we still have that memory. We still have the emotional response. We feel like we're on high alert to everything. And it's like I say, it's like having little meerkats looking out for you 24/7. So what can we do about that? What can we do about switching off that alarm? Because it's fine to have this alarm. It's great that we have intuition that's helping us keep us safe in the world. We want the alarms to go off at, 3 o'clock in the morning when we're thinking about walking over an open space of wasteland or something. We want the alarm to go off when things are uncertain and unsure. But we want it to be reasonably proportioned. We want it to be a proportional alarm based on the event that we're going to. So it's okay to be nervous around going to a job interview or on your first date or maybe doing a live stream. It's when it's too dialed up. When it's too dialed up, we want to be able to dial it down. Now, some of you listening may already be working with clients, and some of you may have amazing tools to help your clients or even manage yourselves with anxiety, overwhelm, and stress. I just want to share with you as we wrap up today one thing from havening. And havening is a psychosensory technique. So that means it uses one of those senses that we talked about earlier. And in this case, it's touch. And it uses touch to change and alter the electrochemical status of our brains. Now, when we are with that dog, let's say we're walking along and we have that dog, our brain has to be preparing us to run. And so we need to have everything working in optimal use so that we can run away or do whatever we need to do, fight, flight, or freeze. Now, our body is an electrochemical body, and it will be running electricity. And it runs electricity called gamma. And gamma is like a high frequency electricity. You can imagine that, can't you? Your heart is really racing fast. You can probably even not even speak. You're sweating. Your electricity is really, really fast. And you're also releasing loads of chemicals. You're releasing lots and lots and lots of chemicals. You're releasing chemicals like glutamate, which is found in trauma cells. You're releasing what is the word I'm looking for? Adrenaline. That's the word I'm looking for. Norepinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol. All of those chemicals are being released. Now, what we do with havening is we alter that. We change that electricity. So I'm just going to switch off my slide now, and I'm going to come back online so that you can see me. Hi, everybody. Good to be back. So what I want to share with you is this technique. It's called havening touch, and it's a technique that you can use. It's really, really simple. It's really quick and easy to apply for yourself or to another person. And the beauty behind this technique is that it alters the electrochemical status at the time. So if we're feeling very stressed and overwhelmed and anxious, it means that we're running gamma waves. It means that we are releasing adrenaline and cortisol, amongst many other things. And with havening, what we can do is we can actually change that. We can teach ourselves to dial down that fear response before it hijacks us. An example of this was I met somebody. I didn't teach them havening. It was on a workshop, and they talked about how they had severe panic attacks. So I showed them really simple havening, just like I'm going to share with you today. This person reported back to me that they had been on a train. They were on the train going into town for a meeting or something, and they were feeling quite anxious. And it started to dial up and dial up and dial up, and they could feel a panic attack coming on. And they knew what that felt like because they'd had panic attacks in the past. And so they started to do this technique that I'm going to share with you, and they were able to dial it down and dial it down and dial it down, and they got off the train and they went and had the meeting. So here's the technique. It's simply magic hands. It's actually about using our own hands. And what we do in this technique is we simply put our hands on our shoulders like this, and we give ourselves a big hug. We just bring our arms down and we stroke down like this. Now this is called havening touch. And havening touch, just doing this to ourselves, sends a safe message to our brain. Because havening, delta waves can only be found in deep sleep. And we can only go into sleep if we feel really, really safe. And so using this stroke, we can generate while we're awake a delta wave. So we are giving ourselves a message that says, we are safe. We are safe. And at the same time, we're just doing this. And I hope that you're joining me with this. I hope maybe you're just practicing this technique for yourself. As we do this, we also release oxytocin, sometimes referred to as the connection chemical. We release serotonin. Now, serotonin is important in many different things. It's also known as the happiness chemical. And it does release GABA. Now, GABA is an amino acid, and this amino acid makes us feel really relaxed and calm. So, using this really simple technique of just stroking our arms like this sends a reassuring message to our body that we are safe. And it releases all those beautiful, yummy, delicious chemicals that also tell our body that we are connected, we are loved, and that we belong. And sometimes if you're going to use this for yourself or with a client, you might even like just to say something like, I am safe. I am safe. You might like to say something like, all is well. All is well. Or you might just like to say something like, relax. Relax. Calm. Calm. And just doing this and saying words like that will help you dial down the dial on anxiety and fear. And so that's what I want to share with you today. I'd like to thank you for stopping by, for connecting across the globe. I really appreciate you giving me that time today. I really appreciate you coming across the globe just to touch base. I think it's really important, either if it's us that has the anxiety or whether it's our friends, our family members, our colleagues, or our clients, when they understand that it's just a response to our bodies and our brain wanting to keep us safe, and that we can control it and we can dial it down. Once we know it's just about electricity and chemicals that are creating a response, once we know that in our own magic hands, we can change the electricity and the chemicals in our body so that we feel safe, then they, you, I, everyone has the power to stop the hijack taking place in the first place. So thank you for joining me. This is the first of what I hope will be a lot of live streams about havening techniques. I'm going to be running, as I mentioned, some trainings in Australia and in Wellington and where else? Christchurch and Auckland. If you're interested, check it out. Check out my Facebook page. Check out my website. Lots of information there. There's also other videos in there as well. Other videos about havening and how and why it works. And there's also some frequently asked questions. So if you're interested in learning more about this technique, give me a call, email me, or check out some of those things. So once again, kia ora. Thank you very much for being here today, and I hope you've got something to take away, and enjoy happy havening. Enjoy using some havening. Kia ora, everyone. Bye.